Hey, I'm Doug, and welcome to Doppler's Gear Garage. In a moment, we're going to get a chance to hang out with John Petrucci and his longtime tech, Maddi Schieferstein, talking about this. Just in case you don't know, this is Dream Theater's 40th anniversary, and it's also John Petrucci's 40th anniversary using Boogie amps. And in honor of all of that, my good friends over at Mesa Boogie have released the limited edition JP2C 112 combo, and this thing is awesome. For the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to be hanging out talking about the backstory of this amp, the JP2C itself, the head is still available, of course, as well as some other very cool John Petrucci related things. This is actually the first of 3 videos. And in the next video, I'm going to demo my way through the feature set with some input from John and Maddi. And then in the third video, I'm going to build a crazy JP2C driven rig with some input from Maddi. With that said, it's my pleasure to introduce John Petrucci and his longtime tech, Maddi Schieferstein. John and Maddi, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, what's going on?
Glad to be here.
So this is both the 40th anniversary of Dream Theater and, John, for you, the 40th anniversary of using Boogie amps. Can you tell us what this means to you?
Well, it's crazy. You know, that's a long time, not only to be together as a band. I mean, I'm really, really proud of Dream Theater and the career we've had and all the incredible years of music that we've made and have brought live all around the world. But, you know, at the same time, while doing all of that, playing Mesa Boogie that entire time, and that being the only amplifier that I've used with Dream Theater or with my solo stuff for 40 years. So it's a great marriage of the two things, and it's an incredible milestone. You know, it's amazing. It makes me really happy.
So in celebration of all of this, Mesa Boogie is releasing the limited edition JP2C 112 combo. Can you tell us the backstory about this amp?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you know, I have to kind of give that to Raina. She asked a while ago, many years ago, you know, it would be great if this the JP2C head came in a combo. Do you have any plans for doing that? And I thought, oh, that's an awesome idea because, you know, a lot of the boogies that I originally had were 1x12 combos. I had, you know, Mark IV and Mark IIC pluses and things like that, and they're all around the house. And the 1x12 combo is classic. You know, that's the classic boogie thing. So when she said that, the kind of idea was planted, and here we are a bunch of years later, and it is a reality. So I think it's really, really cool that we're presenting this for the first time as a 1x12 combo.
Maddi, I understand that you were also involved in the development process. Tell us about that.
John said to me one day, he goes, "Hey, I'd like to get a little combo amp for the lounge so I can sit and practice." And I said, "Okay, cool. I'll call it Mesa Boogie and see what's available." And this is, I guess, right around the time all the supply chains were drying up. So that they said, "No, we don't have anything available." I said, "All right." And I kind of thought, I'm like, "Hey, wait a minute. Do you have like just a 112 combo chassis with a speaker in it? You know, no amp. I can take one of John's amps and I can put it in there, and you know, we'll have one of John's amps as a combo." And they said, yeah, we can definitely do that. So they shipped me a cabinet, and I took one of John's amps. I took the chassis out, put it in the combo, and put a big gift wrap box over it and gave it to John for Christmas.
It was great. I walked in one day. I'm like, I don't think I noticed it at first. You know, I'm like,
no, there's a gigantic box sitting there with an amp underneath it.
So cool. I pulled it up, like, oh my God, that's awesome. How'd you do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess technically the first one still exists with us here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The prototype, I love that. So the amp that's in the 112 combo is identical to the one that's in the head shell. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah, it's just the head, but instead of being a standalone head, it's mounted into a 1x12 cabinet. So yeah, it's the exact same head with the exact same parts and features that you would find in the standalone head.
So you guys have been using the 112 cabinets in the live rig for a while. In a sense, is the JP2C combo like a mini JP rig?
It's a portable rig, you know. That's what's great about the 1x12s. They're great for gigging because they're loud and they're powerful, but you know, you don't have to bring a separate head, separate cabinet. As far as gigging live, I mean, I've done a bunch of different things. I've toured with 4x12s and 2x12s, and on the last tour with Dream Theater 1x12s, which is, they all have their different qualities about them, but it definitely keeps things compact and focused. We just put a mic on each. It's a stereo rig. So very accustomed to that sound, the sound of a 1 by 12 cabinet coming at you. I mean, it's a great sound. It's really focused, really clear.
As I recall, the 112 rectifier cabinets are loaded with a Celestion Vintage 30, which is rated at 60 watts. But the combo is loaded with the custom 90, also a Celestion speaker, and that's rated at 90 watts. John, do you find that you have to dial in your tones any differently on the combo compared to the head?
It's a really smart idea to put a 90-watt speaker in a 1 by 12 combo. That's definitely the classic way of doing that. It's a loud amp. All that sound pressure is coming out of one speaker. So it makes sense. I would say for people out there, I would set the amp exactly as you would if you were plugging it into 4 by 12 and start there. And if you have to make slight adjustments, then do that. But you really don't have to rethink the whole thing. That one 90-watt speaker is going to speak to you, hey, look at that, a little bit differently than a lower wattage speaker or a 4 by 12 would. But you don't have to do any major reshaping of the tone. I just start with my go-to settings and take it from there, and it's usually fine.
All right, so let's get to the nitty-gritty on the amplifier itself. The JP2C is basically a modern take on the iconic Mark IIc Plus, which was originally available with a couple of different options. You get it simulclass, there was a Coliseum, and John, for the basis of your amp, you went with a 160-watt Class AB option. Why did you use that as the basis for your amp?
Well, first of all, yeah, the Mark IIc Plus is the iconic Boogie. I mean, Boogie has made so many amazing amplifiers over the years. I fell in love with the C Plus at one point and kind of never looked back. I played variations of Mark series, of course, Mark IVs and Mark Vs, etc. But when thinking about what I wanted as far as doing a signature Boogie, which first of all, I should say, I'm still amazed that happened. I still pinch myself that I was able to help create a signature amp with Randall, with both our names on it. I mean, it's just wild. I mean, I've been playing Boogie forever. I never thought in a million years that would happen. So to have input, to take such an iconic classic amp like the C Plus and bring it into the modern age, what an opportunity. So that was the starting point. And the first thing we talked about was making it really true to a C Plus, as far as the circuit and the transformer and everything. Starting there, and then looking at the limitations of the original C Pluses, as far as channel selection, EQ, trying to bring it into the modern era as far as adding MIDI and cab clones and things like that. We took the whole thing up many, many notches, but we started with the idea that this has to sound just as good, if not better, than any of the C pluses in my collection. And you're right. I mean, I do have simuls and I have 160s. I chose the 160-watt version, and I usually always run it at 100 just because I wanted a lot of headroom and a lot of power. So that's why I went there, to begin. We had to make a choice there. But yeah, man, it still freaks me out. Look at that thing, and I'm like, how did this happen? So I'm still incredibly grateful.
So awesome. You opted for 3 channels. What did that solve?
Well, the original amp, it technically had 2 channels, right? So you had to engage the lead channel. You had to pull one of the controls, or there was a foot switch. But there wasn't a way to do that within the amp via MIDI. You'd have to have some external MIDI device. And the other thing about it is that both channels shared the same input gain, the first gain stage, and the same EQ if you wanted EQ on both sounds. So that's limitation number 1 and number 2. For a clean sound, to have a great amount of headroom, have that piano-like quality, you really need it to not break up at all, to just be, as clear as, like I said, a piano. So you can't have the input gain set as you would on a lead sound, which would be really high because then your clean sound would be distorted. So that's problem number one. So having a dedicated clean sound with its own gain, its own voicing, it's very much like the Lone Star clean sound, tons of headroom, beautiful. You could get it to break up if you turn up the middle and you crank the presence and crank the gain and really turn the thing up. But, I was like, my mentality is I don't want that clean sound to break up. I want that to be super, super clean. And then the other two channels, 2 and 3, I was playing a Mark V for a long time. And Mark V has the 3 channels, but the channel 2 and 3 differed. So I remember thinking initially before actually having the signature head, can we take a Mark V and just clone, have 2 like lead channels? So that was my thought process with the JP2C, is that channel 2 and channel 3 should really be pretty identical, but I would use them in this way, having channel 2 be my crunch or heavy rhythm sound, channel 3 being my lead sound. So we put a little bit more gain on the lead sound, but essentially they are the same. And the biggest thing is that there are 2 graphic EQs. I mean, anybody who's ever played a Mesa Boogie Mark Series amp knows how powerful and essential that graphic EQ is. And for a rhythm sound, I know this is a long answer, but I'll try to get to the end. For a heavy rhythm sound, you might set that EQ, a lot differently than you would for a lead sound. You might pull more of the middle, bring up some more of the top to get cut. And with a lead sound, you might want to keep that middle in and kind of bring the top down to make it smoother. So again, for the first time, not only do you have a channel 2 and 3 that are pretty much cloned, but you can change the EQ on either of them. You could pick one EQ or the other. So that now all of a sudden we have a independent clean sound, an independent rhythm sound, and independent lead sound. So one amp that covers everything. And that was the goal, and it was achieved.
One of my favorite features on the JP2C is the push-pull functionality on the presence controls for both channel 2 and channel 3. But I understand that was a bit of a happy accident. Can you tell us about that?
It was. You want to take that one, Maddi?
Sure. Yeah, so the presence on the original C plus amps and all the early Mesa Boogies is a very interesting control in the power amp section, and it can either be very complementary or it can take your head off and shatter glass. So most of those vintage amps, once you get up around 3 to 4 on the dial, on the presence control, it's like you can't really go anymore because it's just going to be sheer high end. It's a really great functionality of the power amp section, right? So with the JP2C, the original prototype had the original presence circuit. So, if you're turning the dial up, you'd get around like 10 o'clock or so. That would be 3 or 4 on the original dial, and that would be the sweet spot for it. But some of the newer Mark amps, I believe the Mark V, the presence control was a little bit different. It had much more of a sweep to it, a much more usable range. And coming from the Mark Vs that we had been using in the previous rigs, it was like, wow, that's cool that, you can get more use out of the presence control, right? Instead of just kind of a fixed thing. So we asked the guys at Boogie during the prototype process, hey, can we try that presence circuit? And they're like, yeah, sure. So I think they sent a second prototype head with that circuit, and we couldn't decide which one was better. So we said, can you just put a switch in so we can switch between them? And that's how the push-pull pot came to be.
Yeah, it was like, so, how about both?
Yeah.
So with this amp, can we have both?
Yeah.
I think I kind of remember something where when they were working on that presence control, that the wrong value of some part was put in accidentally, and it was like, wait, this sounds really good. That was the happy accident thing.
Yeah.
And what it is, what my amp brings to the table is, if the presence control is pushed in just normal, like Maddi said, you have more usable range of that. So you could take that presence. It's a lower high-end frequency, so you could take that presence well past noon, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and it's really musical. And then if you pull that, then you have the classic C plus presence where, like Maddi was saying, you don't want to bring it past 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, something like that.
Yeah.
What's really great about this, and I would love for somebody to do the math, but between those two presence controls, the EQ, the graphic EQ faders, and the treble control, you really have so many opportunities to dial in the perfect high end in your sound. It's usually some sort of like delicate balance between the presence, the treble, the high end faders, whether it be the 6600 or the 2200, and it's great. Every one of those things offers a different type of high end, so you can get exactly what you're looking for. You can, with pinpoint accuracy, really dial in the amp to be exactly the sound that you have in your head.
At one of the John Petrucci's Guitar Universe camps, John, you ran through your process of dialing your tones, and it was awesome. And also in watching the video that you did with Rick Beato where you're playing through the Mark VII, it's just the classic John Petrucci sound. Could you walk us through your process and strategy for dialing in your tone?
I'm so used to it at this point, that I could dial that sound in on any Mark series amp. In fact, for the new Dream Theater record, we decided we'd have some fun and pull out my collection of boogies, of C pluses, of Mark IIIs and Mark IVs and my head and everything. And I literally just would go up to them and set them exactly the same, just my go-to sounds. And they just automatically sounded amazing. I will add one thing that's different between the older amps and my new amp is that the older amps had a bunch of pull functions, pull bright and pull deep and things like that. So when we were creating the JP2C, we decided to sort of eliminate those variables. In other words, if on a C plus, I'm always going to have the pull deep pulled. I'm never going to do something without the pull deep, or I'm always going to have the pull bright. Then we're just going to set those controls in the amp, and now you don't have to think about it. So that you automatically already start with an incredible sound. Even if you put everything at noon, well, that would be pretty loud, so watch your master volume, but you're already going to start with an incredible sound. In a nutshell, if I had to dial in a sound in 2 seconds, this is what it is. The gain is up at around 2 o'clock. The master volume, because you don't want to shatter windows, as Maddi said, you might want to start around 10 o'clock. If the presence control is normal, that means the new presence setting, I would start that at about 2 o'clock. If you pull it, then I would set that more to about 10 o'clock. The treble is a really, really powerful control because it adds gain, actually. So I would start somewhere around 1 o'clock, maybe 2 o'clock if you want a more aggressive sound. The middle I would dip around 10 o'clock, and the bass I turn completely off, which is a classic Mark series boogie move when you have a lot of gain. Because you'll find if you crank that bass control, it's going to get flubby when you're trying to do that really super tight percussive thing. Now, if you have your gain lower, then you can afford to have more bass and you get a really full sound. And then I pop on the graphic EQ, and it's the classic Boogie V. You really could just start with pulling the 750 fader down, boosting the 80 and the 6600. It's a great place to start and take it from there. So I could dial that in my sleep, and that's the sound. It just automatically sounds incredible.
Channel 2 and 3 also have push-pull functionality on the gain controls. When and where do you use that?
So this is another one of those instances where it was like, can we do both? So on a classic C+, that initial gain control is where you're sort of setting the input sensitivity, that first level of gain. And there was always this sweet spot. Like any boogie connoisseur will tell you, it's like usually around between 7 and 8, something like that. 7 3/4. There's all these like really super nerdy amounts. So that was one of those controls, like I said, that we set as a permanent setting within the amp that you don't have control over on a JP2C. It's set already. So what you actually have control over is the gain. That would be like the lead gain, lead drive on a C plus. So the only issue with that is sometimes I'd want to just give myself a little bit more input gain on the channel, maybe for a more sustaining sort of part or lead or whatever. So I might turn that input gain on a classic Boogie up to 9, let's say. And I know, you can look at some of the old Metallica settings from Master of Puppets, and they have that thing on 9. So I was like, well, if we're going to have this a set number in the JP2C, can we do both? Can we have like the classic 7 3/4 and then just like a little louder? And the way we did that is with a pull pot. So when it's pushed in, it's the classic setting. When it's pulled out, that input, the virtual untouchable input gain is just turned up a little bit. So you get a little more gain. And as far as when I use that, I don't know, man. It's to taste. It's like salt and pepper. It's to taste. I think in general on a lead sound on channel 3, I'd have that thing pulled because I want all the gain I can have. Yeah, I mean, we go back and forth so many times on that. Sometimes it's pulled, sometimes it's pushed. It's subtle. It's subtle. A good way to kind of find out what it's doing, I would say, is turn the gain on the channel down fairly low, and then push and pull that control, and you'll see it. You'll kind of hear what it's doing. If you have your gain already cranked, if it's like dimed or if it's 2 o'clock, you're not going to hear that much of a difference because it's already getting super saturated and compressed. So try that as an experiment. You'll hear exactly what that pull is doing. It's subtle, but again, it gives you just so many more options.
So in one of the videos that I watched, it was on this crazy tri-axis rig, and you were using some Boogie pedals in the front end. Does the gain control mean that you don't have to goose the front end in this instance?
Yeah, I mean, the JP2C has more gain than you'll ever need. It has plenty of gain for the heaviest of sounds. Whether you're playing 6, 7, or 8, it's going to give that power, and also the most liquidy of lead sounds. Personally, as far as using some sort of overdrive or boost or whatever in the front, that's kind of just for fun. You don't need it. Some of those pedals, depending on what you use, will do a little tone shaping, so it's kind of fun for that. If you really want to go super over the top with gain, you could use a pedal. Now, my Ernie Ball Music Man signature guitars all have a boost on my volume control, so I don't need anything like that. If I really need to feel like I need more gain, I just tap that boost, and I can get up to 20 dB more, into the front of the amp. So personally, I don't need that. We'll throw some pedals in my rig, again, just for fun. Like, oh, got this cool pedal. Wonder what it does. It's another overdrive pedal. Let's see. But it's not needed. It's definitely not needed. There's plenty. You can go to a gig with a 1x12 JP2C combo and a cable, and you'll be all set. Well, you need a guitar too.
Cab clone. You guys are using that live, right?
The cab clone feature being built into the head is amazing. It's incredible for so many reasons, that you could take the head, not having it go through a live cabinet, and pump it out into the PA. It's an amazing feature. You can plug headphones into the amp, and it sounds amazing. We mic our cabinets live, and we also take a cab clone out, and that cab clone out sometimes gets blended into the live microphone sound. Sometimes it gets sent to band members who kind of want like a safer, like sound that's not microphone, something that comes direct that they could sort of have more control over. So we'll use it like that. But having said that, if you wanted to just use that cab clone instead of actual cabins, yeah, it sounds tremendous. Again, another feature on that amp that just makes it so versatile. It's like crazy what's packed into this thing.
Maddi, what are your favorite things about the JP2C?
Uh, well, aside from everything, the MIDI for sure. That was definitely one of the design considerations. Having worked on all of John's old rigs and all kinds of external switching boxes and patch cables, and something gets on the wrong MIDI channel or doesn't get fired correctly from a control change message. So when they were putting the amp together and we said let's do MIDI, it took a minute to get there with it, but now it's to me the most easiest thing on the amp to use.
Yeah.
And just the way the MIDI functionality of the amp works, you can set it up a couple of different ways. You can store your presets for the amp locally on the amp, or you can store them externally on a foot controller or whatever you're using to use it to switch. So, but it's nice now, instead of having external boxes and cables, you just plug a MIDI cable in and you're all set.
Yeah. And what was fun during the development, and I really hats off to everybody at Boogie during the development of this amplifier, whether it was Maddi bringing up MIDI or could we have both presence controls, or we want 2 graphic EQ. I mean, all these, the wish list, they all got put in. That's insane, I mean, cab clone, MIDI, 2 graphic EQs, 3 channels, you name it, all the things we talked about before. And also, for the first time, we introduced something that Boogie hadn't put on one of these amps, which is called Shred. And it was a conversation that I had with Randy about, what happens when I'm playing a 7-string guitar or a guitar that's detuned, maybe tuned down to C or something like that. We need something that kind of simulates, we talked about pedals before. Sometimes when you put a pedal in, it'll maybe boost some mid, or maybe it'll take out some low end. So a lower tuned guitar will speak better. So we need something where we can kind of just switch on for those types of guitars. And Randy came up with Shred. We'll call it Shred. And it's cool because it's just like a voicing shift. It kind of adds more high mid gain, and it pulls a little low end out. So it's perfect. Again, it's MIDI. So I'll do something live, where I'm playing a riff, maybe it's on a 7-string, and I'm doing something that needs to be really aggressive and tight, and I'll just hit that MIDI button that brings on Shred just for that riff. And it's incredible. I mean, that would be like stepping on a pedal to do something like that. You don't need to do that with this head. Again, this one head does everything that you need. It's crazy. It's just packed full of features.
You guys have been working together for a long time. How and when did you meet?
How do we meet, Maddi? Deep Purple.
I think, yeah, Deep Purple, really. So that would have been 98-ish, I think. I was working for Deep Purple, and Dream Theater were supporting us on a tour. And I used to kind of sneak over to John's side of the stage because I was a gear nerd. And I was like, wow, there's the guitar rig that I see in the magazines and all the cabling and all this stuff. So I'd kind of sneak over there. And I don't remember who was teching for you at the time, but I think they got a little nervous, maybe. And then just not too long after that, I joined up with you guys and started working for the band on the Scenes from a Memory tour. But I was actually the bass and keyboard tech on that tour.
Yeah.
It took a few more years for me to get over to the other side of the stage, and pretty much been there ever since.
Yeah, and just for perspective, I mean, Scenes is celebrating 25 years this October. So
yeah,
we've known each other for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's
Yeah.
awesome.
How much of your communication is nonverbal, and how do you manage that process?
A lot of it is, Maddie and I are we keep using this word, but we're definite gear nerds. Like, it's like, we're just constantly talking about guitar and tone and all these esoteric things that only have to do with like us. People are like, "Did you guys talk about something else like this? How many times do you have to talk about your guitar tone?" So a lot of things that we talk about sort of get integrated into, let's say we're touring. We'll have a conversation earlier in the day or the night before. Oh, I would really love to try this. Like let's do the classic. Presence setting on channel 2 for tonight. So a lot of those conversations happen. And then during the show, Maddie just knows what to do. I could look over, he'll know to like abort or turn something up, whatever. And it's great communication to have, especially live. It could be chaotic. And it's great that we have that kind of nonverbal thing. It's awesome.
Yeah. It's a good synergy.
Yeah.
It's, uh, I know what he's thinking. He knows what I'm thinking, and it works together in tandem for the performance.
Yeah,
So
it's also a lot of trust. We're talking about the JP2C combo with the 1 by 12 90 watt. Touring with the 1 by 12 speakers with the 60-watt speakers and playing loud. I mean, I've blown those things, and I've blown them mid-show, and no fault of the speaker or the cabinet. It's just a lot of sound pressure, and I don't even have to look back. There's so much trust going. It's like our monitor engineer, Jimmy T, will switch over to cab clones. Maddie will be back there changing the speaker in real time, and it'll all come back on within, it's like a pit crew or something, and he's back there. And I don't have to look back with like a panicked look or something that the audience will be like picking up on. I just keep playing. And I know, like, Maddie has it covered. He's going to get this fixed, and sure enough, the guitar comes back on, and we're good to go. So, the length of time that we've been working together again lends itself to all this trust, which is so important live. Because live, you're out there and you want to give your best. So you need to depend on the people supporting you. So it's amazing.
Maddie, for all the people out there that don't have somebody like you to turn to, what advice do you have in terms of gig preparedness such that if something in the rig goes down, the whole set doesn't come to a grinding halt?
have some readily available spare stuff. Like for guitar, make sure you have at least one extra set of strings in case you break a string. Have a little toolkit so you can work on your guitar. As far as amps go, always have a couple of spare cables. Uh, Most people are not going to be able to lug around like a spare speaker, but spare fuses in case you blow a fuse for some reason. Uh, Maybe carry a couple of spare tubes, depending on what your amp is and how finicky it is. With the Boogie amps, I change the tubes at the top of a tour leg, and I don't really ever have to worry about them going bad. And the gear's getting slammed around in trucks, up and down ramps, hot, cold, wet, doesn't matter. So they're incredibly reliable in that regard. But it's always, but I do have a drawer full of spare tubes and cables and pedals and strings and parts. And, I mean, I obviously carry a lot more extra stuff than most people would, but just basic stuff, strings, picks, cables, tubes. That should pretty much get you out of any situation. And always have a backup plan.
So last night I was going through the rig segment in Rock Discipline, geeking out on all the crazy stuff that you had in that rig. And one of the things that you talked about, John, was backing up the sound. So I'm kind of curious, Maddie, players like myself quite often will kind of find the perfect spot of where they want things set and then never want to touch it. How do you guys document things so that you can always go back to that perfect tone in case you do make any changes?
iPhone
Hmm.
for all the amp settings anyway. And and it's a daily thing sometimes. We get out on the road and something's working really good one night, and then we come in the next day and, experiment or whatever. And it's always like, we'll make sure we got pictures so we can get back to where we were. And as John was saying earlier, he can dial these amps in his sleep, and so can I. So it's pretty easy to get back to like a good start point for everything. But the iPhone, it really comes in handy for, you can get up on each channel, each graphic EQ, the MIDI programmable stuff, and all the digital stuff gets backed up on a computer. And generally when that stuff gets locked in, we don't really change it that much. So as long as I have a fresh backup at the top of a tour, we're in good shape there. I can always get back to where we started.
So do you have a preference for using something like the RJM Mastermind to be the brain for controlling the entire rig?
Yes, and it's a very I guess old school way of doing it, which harkens back to the old Bradshaw systems and everything, where the foot controller was the brain, and everything else down the line just received signals and did what it was told. With a lot of the new stuff out now, the foot controller can be either the brain or, excuse me, the foot controller can either be the brain or not be the brain. Depends on what your preference is for working. But for us, I just still maintain the old way of doing it. The foot controller is the master brain. It tells everything else in the path what to do. So, you step on a preset button and it fires out any number of messages to all the different devices, and they all work off of those messages.
What MIDI channel do you keep the amps on?
Yeah, so the amps, I believe, are on MIDI channel 2. Both of them are set the same. The Axe Effects is on MIDI channel 1. The pedal switcher is on MIDI channel 3. And it just goes up incrementally from there, anything that's MIDI.
Awesome. So, John, in the JP2C manual, you talk about taking delivery of your first Boogie rig. Can you tell us about that?
Oh yeah, I'll never forget it. Clear as day. Many, many, many years ago, and it was the result, sadly, of my grandfather passing away. But he left me with some money, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna put this to good use. And I went and I ordered really like a full Boogie rig. I ordered a rack, like a full, I don't even know how many spaces. It was a pretty big rack, quad preamp. What was the big power amp, Maddi? The stereo.
Yeah, the 295. It would be that stuff back there in the corner.
Yeah, a MIDI matrix, an abacus. I ordered all this stuff, and I'll never forget, the day that I was still living at my parents' house. This was a long time ago, and the roadway truck pulled up. I was like, "It's here!" And all these boxes of Boogie's gear came in, and then I set out to sort of put this thing together. I'll never forget it. We used to rehearse a long time ago in the basement of this hair salon. I still remember having the rack like on its side, putting stuff in, putting rack screws in, wiring it together, trying to figure it all out. And then that was my first Boogie rig. And the funny thing about that too is back in the day, when I called Boogie, I needed some sort of tech support. The person who answered was Doug West, who's obviously still the king of tone over there. So, and he remembers it. He remembers that call, which is crazy. Yeah, you're talking 40 years ago. I feel like 40 years ago at least. But yeah, a long time ago.
And we still have all that stuff, including the rack.
I never got rid of it. It's insane. Still have all of that stuff. We could put that whole original rig together.
Yeah.
So you guys kind of have a rig graveyard that you can kind of pull the old rigs back to life from time to time. That's pretty cool.
I'd like to call it a library, not a graveyard.
Yeah,
yeah. It's doesn't use the Dewey Decimal System, but it's a
rig archive.
It's a rig archive. That's it. Yeah.
John, getting back to the rig segment from Rock Discipline, you've very clearly been on a tone mission for a very long time. Was there an original kind of sound in your head that you've been chasing, and or has this also been an evolution thereof?
Well, thank you for using tone mission. I appreciate that. I think that every guitar player is on a tone mission. You know, it's definitely something that happens like in stages. I think it starts when you first start playing, and you kind of get into certain players or bands, and you're drawn to a certain sound of that band. Maybe you see a band locally, and you know it sounds amazing, and you see a piece of gear on stage. I mean, that happened to me. I remember seeing Boogies on stage. Local guys were playing. I was like, "What is that thing? It sounds incredible." Um, and then as you do that, then you start to sort of say, okay, well, what is it? I love this band, I love this player. What are they using? And then you start to kind of try out that gear, and you eventually figure out what you like. You know, in the case of Boogie, I've said this, you know, for a long time. For me, I've been using them so long. I was really attracted to the sound of boogies at such an early age that it's become an instrument to me in the same way that my Ernie Ball Music Man signature guitars are part of my DNA, my lifeblood. The boogie as an amplifier is as well. It's this sort of synergy of guitar and amp that it really like shaped me as a player. I mean, from my technique to my expressiveness and stuff like that. And you know, the idea and that I'm able to design these things in conjunction with companies like Boogie or Ernie Ball Music Man, for example, is just mind blowing. I'm humbled by it. I do not take that for granted, and it's great. If you can get to that point, man, life is great.
John, you guys are celebrating Dream Theater's 40th anniversary. That's a lot of history. That's a huge amount of influence to musicians all over the world. What's it like looking back and looking ahead to this upcoming tour for you?
40 years is crazy. You know, I think back to some of the origins. You know, the fact that John Mayung and I are still in a band together. I mean, we met when we were like, you know, in middle school. We were young teenagers. Uh, you know, and we met Mike Portnoy at Berklee College of Music. We were only 17, 18 years old. And, you know, now with Mike rejoining the band, of course, and us doing such a meaningful tour, being back together in this lineup and celebrating 40 years, looking back on the music we've created, all these records, all these tours, all these experiences, and the fans that we have made who are just the most incredible fans on the planet, who are all over the world. I mean, the fact that you can, writing music is a very intimate process. You know, you share this with a few people, and you bring it out there, and then you have people that are in countries far, far away that just relate to it and resonate with it, and you go and play in front of them, and they're singing along and enjoying it. There's nothing like that feeling. It's so great. Music is so powerful, so universal, and it just keeps all of us really very driven. So even 40 years later, we're still the same, you know, kids, quote unquote, passionate about music and playing and being creative and jamming and putting on live shows. You know, it's still just a ton of fun. And, you know, personally, I'm really grateful for that.
In addition to catching up on Rock Discipline, one of my favorite things has been checking out your Instagram. And in one of your posts, you kind of brought out a bunch of amps from the library in preparation for choosing what you were going to use on the new Dream Theater album. The album's not out, so I'm not going to ask questions about the new record, but I will ask how much playing time on the new record did the JP2C get compared to the other amps?
The JP2C is plastered all over the new album. You will basically be engulfed in a sea of JP2C. JP2SEA when you listen to the new Dream Theater album. It's just mighty, mighty, mighty. In fact, that was a fun moment for us. I talked about how we did the shootout with all my collection of boogies and everything. They all sounded amazing. And, you know, we ended up using my amp, which is, I mean, how great is that? You know, sounds incredible. Used a couple of surprises on there as well, which we can talk about at another time. A couple of vintage boogie appearances, but 98% of it is the JP2C.
John, another one of my favorite posts was your Grammy acceptance speech. You thanked everybody by name. And it was clear that you have a tremendous amount of value that you place on the people that you're surrounded with. Can you speak to being a leader, being a team member, being a team player, and also leading with positivity?
Yeah, well, thanks for saying it. I mean, you know, none of us are doing this alone. We're doing this with the massive support of each other, of our families, our wives and our children, of our team and our additional family, of all of our crew and everybody behind the scenes and management and labels and everything. You're not doing this by yourself, you know. So when those kind of moments happen, and believe me, as a guitar player in a prog metal band writing 20-minute songs, I never thought in a million years we'd ever win a Grammy. And to be nominated 3 times and then win was just mind-blowing and so great. So I felt when accepting that and kind of giving that speech, like this is a moment to say, you know, first of all, this is a great moment for like prog in general and prog metal and everybody out there writing this crazy music. And it's a great moment to recognize the team and the family and the love and spirit and positivity that brought us to this moment. You know, it takes a lot of people to get to that point. And I think being grateful for that is so important. But what a moment, man. I'll never forget. You know, some people said I stood in like spread leg rock pose, but I was like, that was such a, you know, a great moment there. Accepting that on behalf of the band. We're still so ecstatic that to have that honor.
Well, gentlemen, thanks so much for taking time to do this. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Doug. Great job. Always
Thanks,
awesome
Doug.
talking to you, man.
First of all, thanks so much for hanging out with me at Doppler's Gear Garage. As a reminder, this is the first of 3 videos in a series. If by chance you haven't subscribed to the channel, want to invite you to do so. Don't forget to ring the bell so I can let you know when those videos go online. Also, for more information about the limited edition JP2C 112 combo or the JP2C head or all things Mesa Boogie for that matter, I invite you to visit the good people over at mesaboogie.com. Thanks again for watching. Cheers.